The good news is, I did cash in both, so looking back on it, I'm glad about that. And the only reason I cashed was all because of post flop play. I ended up doing a lot of unconventional things against players, floating with nine high no draw and stuff in position, and calling with completely horrible hands to raise his pre. Just literally was the only way I was going to win pots, and I just tried to do everything I can to accumulate a stack. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for me in the end. If I would have ran even halfway decent on the final table, though, I would have had all the chips. I was just getting so many big hands at the end, and just nothing held, unfortunately. Which happens. Jack 8 9 7. You can make an argument for about anything here. Could raise, could fold, could call. I'm actually going to raise just because of how tight the table's been playing. And I feel like I can win a lot of hands post flop. I get 3-bet, which sucks. However, Ficky Stingus is in here, which gives me an easy call. That's about one of the best flops I could ask for. Gut shot with top two. Big Sack Lunch has aces or kings a lot of the time. Ficky Stingus decides to call, and he's calling here with like um, straight draws over pairs. And I'm gonna be raising in the spot. There's no reason to call. The raise amount I'm not 100% sure on what the best raise amount is here. Um, I'm just gonna be making it big since the pot's so big. And I could have shoved. I could raise like a little bit smaller, knowing that I have the best hand the majority of the time. And every time he has straight draws, I have so many of the straight draw outs. So you could definitely make an argument for raising smaller, but I think the pot is big enough to just be getting it in there, which is totally fine. I do win that hand. One big thing in Omaha is if you ever have all the nut draw outs, you don't really want folds from other people. So let's say Vicky Stinga's had like an eight in that spot with a couple straight draws, like two or three straight draws. Um, I you know I would want him in that pot. I have the nut gut shot myself, and I also have a lot of the straight outs covered, and I'm gonna have a lot of his two pair outs covered. If he has an eight, he's not gonna have too many better two pair outs. Vicky Stinga's bets $1 into $1.43. Calling is okay, folding I think is atrocious, and raising I think is okay. And I'm actually am gonna end up making the raise. Planning to be betting the turn a lot. It's a flop where there's a lot of turn cards that I'm not gonna like, and I'm just gonna end up checking again, and maybe check folding or calling, and then river deciding again, which I think is okay. Okay, so board on the left, I'm going to be c betting. The 9-4 deuce 3 heart flop. I don't think there's many other plays. If Powerhouse raises, I'm probably just gonna float him. And he does fold. If he calls, so in Omaha, calling represents a lot more strength than raising generally. On shutdown boards, Phil Galfon goes into shutdown boards a lot. If you wanna watch his stuff, just or even type it into Google, just type in shutdown boards, lockdown boards. Um, so a lockdown board would be a board where um, you basically you already have to have a made hand to continue with it pretty much. So if you have top pair on a three heart board, you can't continue with it unless you become bluffing or whatever. And if the flop is uh 6 8 9, no, that's a bad example. Let's say 5 8 9 or 5 6 7. Those are kind of lockdown boards. Because you're either bluffing or you have a large hand. You're either bluffing or you have a straight or you have a set, and there's really not a whole lot of in between on boards like that. Jack Jack 3 is a lockdown board where because Not very many people are going to go crazy with aces, kings, or queens on a Jack Jack 3 board. They're either going to have a jack or they're going to have pocket threes or it's going to be a bluff. So those are good boards to attack. But at the same time, if you look at the other route of it, if someone's calling a lockdown board, they're basically saying they have something. So depending on how advanced the player is, uh, how do I want to say this? Depending on how advanced the player is, if they're calling a lockdown board, a lot of the time it's to show strength, even though they don't have strength, to be able to bluff. And you'll see me do that too. If I think that somebody's not very strong, I'm not always going to be raising a lockdown board. I might just be calling it because a lot of times that represents more strength. And it's the same idea as floating and hold'em, where if the flop came ace deuce three and you're in position with 9-6 suited and you get bet into but you decide to call, the other person is going to be thinking like, well, they have to have something, they have to have an ace or a pair or something to be calling this flop, right? And it's the same concept in Omaha. If it's a lockdown board, you have to have something. You just there's no if, ands, or buts around it unless you're on a complete float to bluff later, which you can get away with. Jack changes the board texture a lot. I'm not going to be bluffing that. However, if the flop has flush draws in it, if the flop has nut straights in it and stuff, that's why 6 8 9 was a bad example because someone could have Queen Jack 10 so easily in it, or just even Jack 10 for all the nut straight outs. So it no longer becomes lockdown because you can get floated by such a wider range. Um, I will take that result. There's no value in betting that river whatsoever, and if you do value bet it, you need to take a long look at your game because you're never getting called by worse ever. Rat-a-tat-tat, I'm going to be raising into. Queen 10 6 5 is a bad hand. However, I feel like he's been playing really tight, and yeah, and he just folds. There's so many flops that he's just gonna fold even if he does call. On the left, 6 7 4 Jack double suited. I'm gonna be completing. I don't think raising makes a whole lot of sense. I have no idea where T Curris is at this point, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to build a pot. Even though I have 3 cards to a straight and a double flush cards. Anytime I make a flush with this kind of hand, I'm not gonna be happy about it. I mean, I'll be happy that I have a flush, but you can't build a huge pot with a 7 high flush or a jack high flush, especially out of position. Because the second you get raised, you are going to be in such a tough spot. So I flop top two. I'm going to be betting a lot against a lot of people. I might decide to check raise, but I'm going to be betting because rat tat tat doesn't show any aggression, and I'm just going to be protecting. So ace seven deuce seven, and he called the flop, which makes this a super easy bet again because he makes a flush here on this turn so often. I think if I check, so I thought if I checked, he um he wouldn't bet a flush too often. He might just pot control. But now that he raises, I'm just going to be shoving. He's a player that doesn't show a lot of aggression, so I feel like he does have a real hand. And he very well could have, a 7 or a flush, and he decides to fold, which is strange. So looking back on it, obviously, I wish I would have called. But the thing is, if I call in that spot, I'm definitely saying I have something big. So most people would shut down there anyway, and when I shove there, I give more hands an opportunity to be able to call. To be honest, by just calling, I'm basically saying I have a boat every time or king high flush, and someone's just not going to be bluffing that river very often. By shoving, I have a wider hand range. I still could be bluffing. I could be shoving flushes where if he has, say, pocket deuces and made a boat, he's not going to fold. If he had a 7, it gives him more opportunity to call and hope to boat up. So now he's asking me if I had aces. Queen 7 8 deuce. I'm gonna be folding. Looking back on that hand, yeah, it's upsetting that he